Hello everybody, welcome to another Big Game Indicating Dogs Q&A. If you want to find out more about the Deer Dog Training Blueprint, you can do that at biggameindicatingdogs.com, and you can also follow Big Game Indicating Dogs on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube, and you can also follow my personal stuff at Paul John Michaels at Instagram, Facebook and YouTube as well. Let's get into the Q&A. So the first question is from Alex. Hi Paul, I have a 5-month-old GSP, absolute character, everything is on track. However, we're still on occasion getting the puppy sprint and biting the long line. So real common question, we've had this quite a few times before. Puppy sprints is when the pup starts to act like an idiot and run around in circles. I've tried the command of disapproval, however, it doesn't seem to respond. He doesn't seem to respond to the command of disapproval at all. Also not really big game indicating, but at home in the garden he seems to love eating dirt and grass. How can I stop this? Or should I even worry? Again, command of disapproval will get a reaction, but he will keep doing it. Cheers, appreciate all the work. P.S. The puppy sprints come after command. The puppy sprints come after stop command, usually 10 minutes into our walk. It happens 5 to 6. Happens 1 out of 5 to 6 walks. Okay, so it's hardly even happening. I think that's what that means. It happens 1 out of 5 to 6 walks. So anyway, my notes on this is before the PS of that the puppy sprints come after a stop command, usually 10 minutes into our walk. My first note was you either need to be more firm or more consistent. Usually puppy sprints, well, it can be one of two things, and it's interesting here. So, and then my note after the PS is, so this is completely, the PS, this is completely different and changes everything. This tells me there is too much repetition, not enough movement. You might need to make training sessions more interesting and fun and relaxed for the dog. If the training sessions might be getting a bit repetitive and boring. If they're coming, if they're not every session, and it's usually 10 minutes into the session, it's usually the pup getting bored and kind of, I spoke about this in a very recent Q&A where you're almost driving the dog around the bend doing the same boring stuff over and over again, and the same stuff in the same place in the exact same way, and too much repetition, and there's not enough in training that's making it fun for the dog. And you're going out there and you're going through the motions and rinsing and repeating over and over. A real good way to remedy this, and I've spoken about this heaps before, is longer breaks between your drills, but longer breaks between the stop drills, and more and longer just relaxed walking. And more time and movement. I talk about time and movement. I've talked about this so much in Q&As. More time and movement between your drills. If you do a drill, go through the motions, release the dog, walk for 1 minute, do another one, release the dog, walk for 1 minute, do another one. You drive the dog, and me just repeating that, saying that over and over again will drive you nuts. Imagine being the dog, actually being ordered around and told what to do like that. You really do need to break those commands up. Keep training sessions as relaxed as they can be. It's always a balancing act, right? It can't be all stupid and good puppy, all that sort of stuff. That doesn't work either. That's our principle of pressure and praise. You put pressure on what you don't want, praise on what you do want, and you do need to have a certain amount of seriousness in training. But it's very important to balance that out with praise and relaxed body language from you, a relaxed tone of voice. It needs to be very black and white, and there needs to be quite a contrast. Ideally, you want to be nice and calm and relaxed in training, and your commands are just sort of sit, and the pup listens, and you're nice and calm, step in, give the pup a pat, step back, walk around in a circle. Your body language is all relaxed, you're relaxed. You take those moments to just stop for no reason. It's so easy to go out and train and only train. And when you're training, the only interaction you have with the pup is to sit, stop, good dog, no, stop, like that. Really, really good in, say, a 15-minute training session where you do 5 or 6 drills, to stop a couple of times for no reason and just kneel down. Usually when you kneel down, the pup will come to you anyway, and just give it a pat, let it lean against your legs, even sit down on the grass with it and just have a moment with it. Make sure the tone and everything's staying nice and calm and relaxed, and then move on again. And in this sort of a situation, when you're starting to get those puppy sprints and biting the long line and frustration, it's usually that. There can be loads more to it as well. And actually the other main thing to it is generally a lack of structure outside of training, and a lot of sort of silly play and foolery with kids and other people or yourself, and the pup sort of just roaming free around the house and on and off the couch and playing with people and kids and all of that. And then you want to put a long line on it, and in training you're like, sit, stop, stay, go, move, stop, turn. And you wonder why the pup gets annoyed and frustrated. Everything's got to be, the more linear it can be, the better. And things need to be nice and calm and controlled and relatively structured around home and outside of training, and nice and calm and chill, but structured. And then you want to carry that same tone across into training. And when you do that, the more structure you have outside of training, and the better your overall management is with your pup or dog, the easier training is. And then you're using less pressure in training. Training goes faster and smoother. More of your interaction with your pup or dog is praise and good dog and the release. As soon as that balance tips into more pressure and no, sit, and you get pissed off too, dogs are a real mirror. If you're getting annoyed and frustrated and a lot of pressure, I've told the story several times in Q&As about the guy that said, man, I don't know what it is about my dog. He's just always hyper. He won't stop. He won't sit still. Our training sessions always end up in frustration. I'm getting really mad. His tone was really intense. And he was like, sit dog, no, sit over there, stop, get. And you've got to be really careful about the energy that you bring into training. Really important. Really important to have that good, calm structure outside of training, and have training be nice and calm, your execution good, and make sure you're not driving your pup or dog around the bend. And being nice and calm, having those times where you slow down and stop and just pat your dog for no reason, and then walk for a good 4 or 5 minutes so the pup can just enjoy itself and cruise. And because you've just stopped and patted it, and the relationship with your pup or dog is good and chill, and you mean good things to your dog as well, and you mean good things to your pup or dog while you are training, your pup or dog is going to be much more likely to actually want to just stop and sit down on that stop drill. And then you can step in pat it, and get the ball. That's how training should be. You really need to get into the point where you're getting the ball rolling and getting the real basics started in a positive way. So training is fun and positive, and you're getting those opportunities to pat and praise your pup. And then you just slowly, with our step-by-step system and the blueprint, you just slowly add new little bits in that the pup can get pretty quick too. So there's not this big disaster of having to add all this pressure, making training, stressful for the pup or dog. And because they just don't learn like that. It's not fun for you. It's not fun for the dog. It's just not good. You really need to try and get into that good space where training's just cruisy and you're going through the motions. You have to add pressure, and you always have challenges and stuff, and that topic comes up later on in this Q&A actually. But really important. And, another thing here that stands out to me, and this is why I sort of that whole idea of the structure outside of training being really important to make training easier, is talking about he seems to love eating dirt and grass. At home in the garden, he seems to love eating dirt and grass. How can I stop this? It's that, and he's a 5-month-old GSP. It's that same story. How do you stop a pup or dog eating grass and dirt in the garden? You put it in a kennel or put it on a long line, and those freedom sessions need to be short and supervised with a young pup. And as soon as they start getting into mischief, chewing on sticks and digging a hole and eating grass and eating dirt, that's why we explain in the blueprint, like when you start giving freedom sessions, they start off with just a few minutes at a time and in a safe dog-proof area, and you're watching the pup out the window, and the second it starts digging, walks over the corner, sniffs the ground, sniffs it, paws at it a little bit, has a scratch with its paw. The second it starts properly digging, you're watching it out the window and you go, "Hey!" And you smack your hand on the wall and yell, command of disapproval, good timing, right on the button of the pup starting a negative thing. And it's going to go, and it'll stop, and it'll start doing something else, and you keep an eye on it. If it starts doing it, "Hey!" Command of disapproval. It's really important that you start off those freedom sessions in that way. And that's what, when we talk about management, that's what it is. It's managing everything, and the principle of freedom and responsibility. Incrementally, step by step, you give your pup or dog more freedom and responsibility as they get ready for it. And that's really what a good training system and your whole management system outside of training is all about that. And as that gets too loose, and a pup or dog is getting too much freedom outside of training, that same loose attitude comes into training and makes your job so much harder. Next thing, you're getting into too much conflict with your pup or dog. Training isn't fun for you or the dog. You start getting puppy sprints and acting out and silly shit, and it gets pretty difficult. Yeah, so let us know, Alex, how you're getting on with that. Some of these questions are pretty bloody old. This is another late Q&A. Let us know where you're at with that and if that makes sense. Brendan. So this is slightly rewritten, guys. It was quite long and a little bit all over the place, so it's a little bit rewritten, but the essence of it is exactly the same. Brendan, my dog is a 15-month-old heading dog. I got her from a farm 3 months ago. Apparently, she was more interested in following the farmer than working stock, so they decided to rehome her. She's very friendly and well-natured. I have little knowledge of her environment and training prior to us getting her. The issue I'm having is that we live in the suburbs and very frequently encounter other dogs on the footpaths or at local parks. Overall, she's really good and attentive, but the moment she sees another dog of similar stature to her, a collie, etc., she becomes laser focused on them and sometimes even drops on all fours like she's about to put a stalking on them. She used to try and break to chase them, but the long line has stopped that. So again, another really classic example of how important it is to have structured training, and that you do your early training on a long line until you have full control of a pup or dog. The whole system of training on a long line just cuts all that sort of stuff off at the pass. However, rather than walking with me, I will often have to start tugging her with the long line until we are further away from the other dog. If someone is coming up behind me with the dog, I normally just step to the side and wait for them to pass, as I know she will be inattentive and constantly trying to turn around until the dog is further away from us. Is stopping until they pass a good way to handle this? It is if the dog's really bad, and we'll dig right into this, but I know what you mean. So basically, the problem Brendan's having is his dog is really a little bit obsessed with other dogs, particularly a certain type of dog. If she's an ex-farm dog, and you're saying that she's you don't know much about her environment before you got her, other than that she come off a farm and wasn't showing much early interest in cows. So the farmer was like, oh, we'll get rid of her. If she's come off a farm and she's really interested in other dogs, particularly dogs that look like her, I'd almost guarantee that she spent a lot of time playing with other dogs on that farm. And that's why when she sees another dog that looks like her, it's triggering that thing. She's like, here's another dog that looks like me, which looks like another farm dog, which is what she's used to playing with. She's eyeing them up and wants to go and run and chase and play because she's done it before. That's a classic example of, lots of things can happen like that. We talked about this a lot. Basically, one moment can count forever. Every moment counts. The rule of transfer. If a dog does a lot of something that you don't want it to do in one environment, that'll transfer over to other environments where you really don't want them to do it. Things like if we let dogs chase rabbits, they're far more likely to want to chase a deer. If a dog chases a deer one day in one place, it's going to be far more likely to want to chase a deer in another time in another place. It all transfers over. Things become habit. Same with playing with dogs. If a pup or a dog is in a situation where it's doing hard free running, playing with dogs, even whether it's on the back lawn, at a dog park, at home, at dog daycare, if they spend lots of time playing with dogs, you can get that obsession thing with other dogs, and it can be a real pain in the ass. And every time that dog sees another dog, even at a distance, it's just locked in on it. And it sort of made other dogs kind of its job. Kind of like a sheep dog gets obsessed with sheep, or a duck dog gets obsessed with ducks. Prince are totally obsessed with deer. Anytime I'm watching TV or YouTube or anything, and any sort of animal comes on screen, he's full on. Anytime it's anything to do with hunting, he hears a gun go off or sees deer on screen, he's just obsessed with it, exactly like your dog is with other dogs. So I would almost guarantee that that's what's happened with this dog. It's a rehomed dog that's come off a farm. It's an older dog, and I'd say it's played with other dogs a lot in its past, and that's why it has its obsession with other dogs. I'm speaking from real relevant experience with this, and I've spoken about this in Q&As quite a lot before. While I was making the deer dog training blueprint, I was also doing deer dog boot camps at home, which was getting other people's dogs around to my place, and I was training them for them. And So we had a lot of dogs coming and going, and I had a big deer fence dog enclosure on the back lawn, and the dogs would get freedom sessions inside that really good, safe, dog-proof area. And as Print got older, he started doing freedom sessions in there with these dogs, and that time that Print spent with all these other dogs coming and going and playing with them, again, it was supervised and semi-supervised, keeping an eye on it. If one dog started barking or they started getting too full on, and that would interject or take that dog out, or, put them in there in batches, sort of put 2 or 3 in there, and they'd play together, and then they'd come out, and then you'd put the other lot in and stuff like that. It's funny how different combinations of dogs cause different types of behaviors. But long story short, Print did spend a lot of time playing with a lot of different dogs as he grew up. And it wasn't much of an issue for me when I was out in the country, because when he was around other dogs, that was at home in that area where they were having freedom sessions. And then when I'd train, I'd go out into paddocks and things. But as soon as I moved to town, I had not as well. It's hard to say because I haven't seen exactly what your dog's doing, but kind of similar. Print can be pretty freaking obsessed with other dogs. I've always been able to control him, even off leash, but he can just be a goon, and his range sort of turns to custard, and he's almost sort of like trying to walk forward, but he's looking sideways to a dog out that way, and he's tripping over stuff and going off the track, and just being an absolute idiot, particularly when he was younger. It's something that I've always had to put pressure on and manage it and work on it as much as I can. And over the years, he's just got better and better and better. And Print's like 6 now, and he's getting much better, but he's still kind of a dork. He's way, way better now than what he was when he was like 2. So that's what that is. And, is stopping until they pass a good way to handle it. It is if your dog's really, really bad, if you're trying to walk and because it can be that bad where the dog's in front, it realizes another dog's behind you, and they just turn into absolute idiots. And next thing you're trying to walk forward, and the dog just stops and turns sideways in front of you. And if you keep walking, you're going to trip over the dog. So you've got to walk around the dog, and then it's trying to go backwards while you're trying to go forwards. Next thing, it's getting tangled up on the line, and you can give it a command of disapproval. It's not even listening. It's so focused on this dog behind you that it's just a shambles. And in that case, when things get really messy like that, you are better off just to call the dog to you, step to the side, and tell the dog to sit. And in situations like that, when it's really full on and you've told the dog to sit and it's not listening, it's actually a really good opportunity to address the situation and basically work on your stop under distraction. You're basically, in the blueprint we talk about increasing distraction on the stop. We start training our stop command in a very low distraction environment in basically the easiest way possible. And throughout the course of the blueprint, 12 months of training, we basically escalate that stop command all the way up to a silent stop, hand commands, stopping from a distance, shooting around the dog, having other dogs around the dog, up to a very high level of control on the stop. When you're out and about and things like that happen with the dog coming up behind you and your dog just spazzing out, it is actually a good opportunity to work on distraction on the stop. And at the extreme end of the scale, sometimes when you're starting with a dog like that and you're in these difficult situations, it's even more difficult when the other dog's approaching you, and you do get that in town where you're working on a stop drill with a dog. I've had it where I'm at one end of a rugby field and at one entrance to like a sports ground, and another car pulls up at the car park at the other end and lets their dog out, and their dog jumps straight out of the back of the car, sees me like 200 meters away with my dog, and two dogs just come running flat stick all the way from the other end of the sports ground and basically skidding right up to my dogs with their tails straight up and their hackles all up and standing all staunch and stuff. It's pretty all over the top and not really what you want, but you know, a lot of dog owners are like that. They're super chill, and then they'll come over and say, oh gosh, they're having a great time playing, aren't they? And my dogs are so friendly, they just love other dogs, and they've got no idea that you're actually there trying to train a dog, and that's the last thing you want. And it's really good to avoid that sort of stuff as much as you can, particularly if you have issues like this. Really important to get into a good area and get the ball rolling and get your training started off in a low distraction environment. But as you progress through training, and if you are putting in a really good effort to get into a good low distraction environment to train, and when these things do come up, it's good to try and use it as constructively as you can as an exercise. And for me, at times with dogs that aren't dealing with situations like that well at all, it can even get to the point where I've got the long line in my hand, so the dog can't go anywhere. I'm shortening up the long line as the dogs are running in. I tell the dog to sit, and I step around in front of the dog. Say the dogs, whichever way the other dogs are coming in from, that's going to be the way that my dog wants to face. They want to face the dogs coming in, and I can tell my dog to sit, and I'll stand right in front of my dog. So then I'm going to be between my dog and the other dog as the other dog comes in, and as my dog tries to sit up, as the other dog gets there, and the other dog might come in and try to walk around me, I'll step around as the other dog comes in, and I'll stay between the other dog and my dog and just keep telling my dog to sit. And if they try to stand up, I've got the long line in my hand. I can tighten up on the long line a bit and step in and push their bum down and just say, sit. And you know, I've even been in situations where it's other dogs coming in full on that could almost be, particularly when I'm training a dog that, you know, doing remedial training and things like that. I have worked with dogs that have dog-on-dog aggression problems. That's the best way to neutralize that whole thing. Put pressure on your dog. Sit down, stay there, and I get in front. I get between my dog and the dog coming in. I'm addressing the dog coming in, and I'm taking over the whole situation, and my dog can sit back and sit down. It also neutralizes the other dog coming in a lot too. The worst thing you can do in that situation is tell your dog to sit and stand behind it as the other dog comes running in. There's almost no chance your dog's going to stay sitting as another dog comes bowling in with its tail right up, and they're usually all like head right up, tail right up, and sort of a dominant walk, and they come charging in. That's how I deal with that. You know, nowadays that might, you know, Print and Miko are older and fully trained. I'm not that full on about it, you know, and if other dogs want to come running in, I can call my dogs back and put them in at heel or something like that. And it still can be difficult when you're trying to call your dogs back, but they've literally got other dogs bearing down on them from behind, and your dogs don't want to come because they want to turn and face the other dog running in. It really can be a difficult situation. And it's sort of out of your control when it's like that and other dogs are off leash and charging in. But I always put pressure on it. If other dogs are charging in and my dogs start to look like idiots, I'll just call them to me. If they try to turn around as the other dogs come bearing down right behind them, it's basically a command of disapproval. Print, Miko, come here. And I'm always reassured. I'm putting pressure on what I don't want. I don't care how crazy the situation is. I don't just let it slide and say nothing and let my dogs go running off, because that's going to build momentum and become habit and get worse and worse. I'm always trying to manage the situation, put pressure on what I don't want. I give them, come here. And then when they come in and they're walking with me again, after I give them the recall command, I say, good dogs, praise on what I do want. I'm always creating that contrast and sending those messages of what I do want and what I don't want. And it's sort of, there's always a process of constant management with a dog, like for their whole life. And they just get easier and easier and better as they get older if you handled everything properly like that. But yeah, so that's what I would do with that dog. Just try to handle it the best you can. Stopping it and going back to that idea, should I just step to the side and make my dog sit? That is a good way of dealing with it, as I just explained, when it's a difficult situation that's sort of hopeless on your part to try and keep walking. Just make your dog sit and look at it as a increasing distraction on the stop exercise. That's also an exercise to sort of anchor your dog, let that dog pass. And the more you do that and the more you manage it correctly by getting in between your dog and the other dog, your dog will be real full on the first couple of times you do that right. The third or fourth time you do it, or the fifth or sixth, they'll be a little bit more relaxed. And then you'll get to the point where then you can get to the point where you can stand beside them as the other dog walks past. Keep doing that. And after a few months of training, and through training, your dog's getting better at everything anyway, and slowly calming down and relaxing, and through good leadership from you, they're getting better and better and overall with everything. And eventually, and everything just slowly calms down and becomes more and more controlled. And all of a sudden, you can just say sit, and you can stay standing 2 meters away while the other dog walks past, provided the other dog doesn't come right over and get in your dog's face. Then you're sort of screwed in that situation. But as you start to get to that point and everything starts calming down, then you want to start to be able to work on just continue walking. You don't want to have to do that. And one word of caution here too, one thing that you can do, and that can happen with things like this, is this happens with people with dog on dog aggression a lot. Their dog snaps at another dog one day, so they start, and that freaks them out. This is quite common with breeds like pit bulls and Alsatians and Rottweilers and stuff like that, dogs that have that reputation for being like that, and they're a bit intimidating. And it's pretty scary for the average dog owner, someone just owning a random pet, when they actually see that start to come out in their dog, and it freaks them out, and they really don't want it to happen. So they carry a lot of tension with it themselves. And the minute a dog comes around the corner like a block away, they tighten up on the lead. And, if the dog's name's Stan, they're like, Stan. But that's that mirror thing again. And they're freaking out, tightening up on the lead. That tension's transferring to the dog and elevating the dog's state. And then as they approach, the dog starts pulling harder on the lead. The owner pulls harder back, and the owner's voice gets louder and louder. And they're like, Stan, no, Stan. And it can actually become, the dog actually thinks that's the routine. What does a dog do when they see a dog in the distance and they want to start getting aggressive? They'll lean forward, tighten up on the lead, and start growling and barking. What are you doing? You're tightening up on the lead and you start growling and barking. No, Stan. You doing that can literally, the dog thinks that you're both doing it. You're a team. Here's another dog, and we're both pulling back and forth on this lead, racking each other up, and let's get into this other dog. It really can be. You think you're telling your dog, no, stand up. The dog literally thinks you're both getting ready to have a crack at this dog. And then when it happens, you go, Stan, no. And then you walk off and everything calms down, and the dog literally thinks that that's what it's meant to do. That really can happen. It's the same with the dog breaking and chasing stuff too. You can no, wait, come here. And if you do that once and your dog breaks when you make that sound, and then you do it again and again and again, and you get louder and you yell louder and your dog still breaks again, you yelling and saying, no, wait, sit, wait, as it breaks, you can get to the point where that just becomes the pattern. And as you get closer, you see your dog thinking about it, you start going, no. And that's what you did last time. And that's linked to a build of tension and pressure. And it becomes a pattern. You need to be really careful with that sort of thing. And that can happen with obsessions like this, obsessions with other dogs and things like that. And you can get into a little routine. So something like that, with every time I see another dog, I make my dog sit and stay. You've got to be careful that you don't get into that sort of a spiral with it. And that's where just timing and pressure and our whole with the true sort of meaning of timing and pressure being the timing and measure of the application and releasing of pressure and praise. It's really important that the pressure comes on as the dog goes to do something, but the pressure comes, you get the dog to the point where it relaxes and buttons off, and you can praise it too. So if you're getting the dog to sit as another dog walks past, it's important that you can say, sit, and then it can sit, and that all your body language relaxes too while it waits and lets it walk past. Yeah, anyway. So some other notes. Yeah, Print was like this, and it's from playing with other dogs. That's why she does it with dogs that look like her, because she would have done it on the farm you got her from. Another note here, it's a real pain in the ass, and it could be hard to fix once it's ingrained. It really can be. It really can be. And the final note on this is, some really high-end training systems and trainers don't let their dogs play with other dogs at all. They just don't. Some, bird dog training systems, security dogs, service dogs, things like that, right from a pup, that dog does not play with other dogs, ever. And you can really see why, because it can be a real pain in the ass. It really can. It's a whole other subject, but the whole puppy, doggy daycare and all of that, when all of the dogs just go into a big dog enclosure, and there's one in Papamoa, and you walk past the bloody thing in the middle of the day, and there's just all these dogs barking, and it's full on chaotic barking too. It's just rap, 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 like there's dogs just going nuts in there. It's like a freaking asylum. And you've got to be careful with some of that stuff. It really can. Dogs playing real crazy with each other, and other dogs really can crop up in other places, and be a real pain in the ass. Sort of going back to a similar thing to going back to, a lack of structure outside of training, transferring into training and becoming a problem. Next question, Toby. Hey, Paul, I've just started the blueprint with a very young pup, only 8 weeks old, a GSP cross Vizsla. I started kenneling from the first day as per the blueprint. It seems to be going well. She is settling after 5 minutes on day 2. First day was 20 minutes or so. So it's going good, I think. Obviously early days. Just a question I haven't seen asked. I heard on the Q&As, just a question I haven't seen asked or heard on the Q&As. I know I'll disturb her if I go outside and wake her up, even if it's not time to let her out. So I haven't been going outside while she's in the kennel unless I'm letting her out. When should I start incorporating going outside and not letting her out while she's quiet? If it's been talked about, what are the time codes? Thanks a lot. My note on this is just a really common sense thing. You obviously need to be able to go outside while your pup's in the kennel. It's a good idea to be early on. It's a good idea to be careful with it early on, and then just start doing it more and more as your pup gets used to it. So, again, this is an old question, so I think Toby's well past this point now. I'd be interested to hear how you got on with this, but that's just a real common sense one, man. It's good you're thinking about it, and because if you've just got your pup settled and quiet in the kennel after it was barking and whining for 5 minutes, you don't want to go outside and noisily throw something in the wheelie bin and slam the lid down to wake it up, because it's just going to screw it up. But again, it's just a common sense thing. As it starts to get calm and quiet in there, one day you look out the window and it's awake, then just go out when it's like that, while it's awake, and you should just be able to start living your life around your pup in the kennel and get used to it. But it's a good point. You do want to use your common sense. You can, you wouldn't want other dogs or kids playing noisily in front of your pup while you're also trying to teach it to be quiet in the kennel. You're going to have to be a little bit strategic about it for a while, but eventually, over time, and using the same principle of training and steps and freedom and responsibility, just slowly ramp it up. You should be able to quietly go out one day and sort of walk past your pup without it going absolutely berserk. You might go outside one day and it does sit up and start whining, and you can give it a command of disapproval. Hey, stamp your foot, cut it out, and walk back inside and let it cry it out and be quiet again, and then go back out and let it out while it's quiet. And it'll learn that it's exactly the same. It's all an extension. Getting your pup used to being quiet in the kennel while you're out there doing stuff is an extension of training it to be quiet while nothing's happening out there. It's all the same stuff. You can put pressure on it, use the principle of pressure and praise, and training in steps, and just slowly build it up. It's all the same stuff. Well, hi Paul, would it affect my pup if I did my non-target species aversion training with rabbits and possums before I do the scent work? Just been stuck in lockdown in Auckland, so can't get any deer skin, but I have possums and rabbits. Cheers. So I actually answered this one and a few of these in the comments straight away as they come up in the Big Game Indicating Dogs Inner Circle. All these questions are from people who are in the Big Game Indicating Dogs Inner Circle, and which is a closed private Facebook group for people who are following the Deer Dog Training Blueprint. But like I said in the comments, as much as it sucks to wait in a situation like lockdowns, you really should wait. And I put a post up about this, about sequencing. So I've got here the importance of sequencing, doing things in the right order. It's so freaking important, man, because you should definitely do your scent work with your positive scent work with deer skin, and get your dog working well on deer skin before you do your aversion training. Because if you do your aversion training with rabbits and possums first, if you set up some rabbits and possums and you go out and you teach your dog with the long line, check on the long line to not pay any interest in possums and rabbits, I'd be pretty sure, and in some cases, definitely, every dog's a little bit different, But if you do that with enough dogs, and it could happen with yours, you could really slow your dog down in showing interest in the deer skin. But if you do the deer skin first, and that's a positive thing, and you get your dog hunting on the deer skin well, and you get the dog to the point where it knows that that's a target scent, and everything's smoothed out and sorted with that, and then you do your aversion training with possums and rabbits, your dog's still going to know deer is okay, possums and rabbits isn't. And this is a classic case of sequencing, really important to do the important thing first of the deer, the more important thing. And sequencing's tricky. There's lots of different things that it's important to do a certain way around. I had this exact same issue with Miko, who had been Kiwi aversion trained twice on Kiwis before I used her on ducks. And because she'd had that massive zap, and a lot of trainers have that frickin' collar turned right up and give the dog a real good zap. If I had done ducks first, and Miko had been hunting on ducks and pheasants, I'd shot some birds, she'd retrieved ducks, everything had gone well, and got her cranking there, and then she'd been Kiwi aversion trained, I bet you it'd do bugger all, and you take her back to ducks and she's already got that positive experience, she would have been all over them. But that Kiwi aversion training, combined with her getting some shocks early on, she got a shock off the fence trying to retrieve her first duck, and then she got a shock off the fence about 5 birds later trying to retrieve a pheasant. And that combined with the Kiwi aversion training was a real problem for me. And I wouldn't be surprised if just the shock on their own wouldn't have been anywhere near as bad, potentially not an issue at all. But that perfect setup of the Kiwi aversion training, and then her getting the shock out hunting off the fence in her head, just put two into, and the fact she'd been Kiwi aversion trained twice, and then she got shocks in the field twice trying to retrieve birds, it turned into a real issue. It's so important. And, the note here is, where's my note? This is it. You can do all of the right things in the wrong order, and you can work 100 times harder to never get the end result you could have easily got by doing the right things properly in the right order. So you're doing the right things still, but doing them in the wrong order can make it way, way harder, and it really freaking can. Another example with this is with Miko, and another mistake I made with her on the birds was I had some early on issues with her with gunfire, which is completely ridiculous for me to have these issues as a dog trainer. But it just shows how important it is to do everything absolutely perfect, and trying to cut the tiniest corner can create so much issues that can just be a real pain in the ass for a long time. And a few little things adding up and then linking up together later on can few minor issues that coincide and combine and link up later on in the field with one or two other issues can really all mount up into a serious freaking issue. And early on with Miko, before I had even used her as a hunting dog, I was just out at Mum's place one time, and I had printed Miko here, and I was shooting some rabbits around in the paddocks and stuff, and I had the 22 out here. I can't remember what I was doing exactly. I think I had the 22 out here because I was going to shoot some rabbits later on that night, and I wanted to put some shots through it, and Print and Miko were running around, and I had some subsonics, And I thought, oh, Miko will be all right, but I'll just carefully fire a shot with subsonics and a suppressor and see what she's like. This is why it's so important to do everything so freaking carefully. Do everything totally structured. Start off with the clapper from a distance with a quiet clap and a stop drill and all the right surroundings. Everything's got to be perfect because you don't know what's going to cause an issue with some dogs. And I fired a shot with the 22 carefully, not looking at it, all the body language correct and everything. And sure enough, I turned around and she was a little bit weird on it. She was like, what the hell's going on there? And I thought, oh, she'll be right, the first one. And I fired a couple more shots and she wasn't. She wasn't sure about it at all. She didn't like it. So I just stopped. And then later on, I can't remember where I went to from there. But then what happened? Oh, what happened is then I got her pretty good with the shotgun through further training. But she, right from that time though, right from that very first time when I got the shotgun out, she was a little bit weird on it. And I had to do quite a bit of work back and forth with the clapper and the 22 and the shotgun. And I got her pretty good, but she was never 100%. This is why everything needs to be real solid and 100%. And you need to be real freaking careful with everything. And then what happened, she'd had the sequencing thing with the Kiwi aversion training. She'd had all that first. And then I started doing blind retrieves with her. And then as you start to combine everything, the gun that she's not 100% with, she's okay if you work at it, and I got her as good as I could. And then I started doing blind retrieves did them with dummies, and then eventually I was doing blind retrieves with a dead bird, and the dead bird reminded her of the Kiwi aversion training. And she didn't like the gun. She had something funny about the gun, and it all started combining together. And then when it all combined together out in the field, when I shot a bird and she got a shock off the fence, she didn't know what was going, and she was linking the whole thing together, the bang of the gun and the bird and the electric shocks. And she didn't know quite what was happening, but she just knew every now and again. She didn't know when the next shock was going to come. You know, and it just caused so many issues for us, and we had a freaking nightmare with it. And second to that, then I had a marking issue because she was unsure of the gun. Sometimes when I lifted the gun up, she'd sort of shy away and like lean away and look away, which is the opposite you want with a gun dog. You want a dog, when you lift the gun up to shoot with a bird dog, you want your dog to have its head up, watching for the bird you're shooting so it can mark the retrieve. And as all of this was happening, you know, and I was filming it all, and I was also writing and making the bird dog boot camp, but I scrapped the whole freaking thing because there was all these issues, and it was all just sequencing stuff. It was all sequencing, and I worked out exactly how I'll do it next time. Next time I'll actually, this is a real classic case of sequencing. Next time I'll obviously be like, do what we do in the blueprint with the introduction to gunfire, do loads of training first, have all my stop command and everything, start off with the clapper, move up to the 22 and do it all and very thoroughly with lots of repetition and like overdo it. Do it until the dog's just bored before you move on to the next step. And then I'll escalate it right up to, the unsuppressed 22. But before I introduce the shotgun, what I'll do is I'll introduce the shotgun and the dummy launcher at the same time. The first time I shoot a shotgun with that dog, and I'll link the clapper with the throw of the dummy. So the dog learns, bang, retrieve going out. Bang with the clapper, throw the retrieve. Bang with the clapper, throw the retrieve. Even get someone to help, someone else to bang the clapper and throw the retrieve, or use a cap gun. That's another really useful tool. A starter pistol or a cap gun. So even on your own, you can literally, right as you throw the dummy, you can go bang with a cap gun. Even a little kid's cap gun that makes a quiet bang. There's all sorts of different ways you can have from a very quiet clap to a little cap gun pop to a louder bang, but all while you throw the dummy. And I'll get the dog right up to the point where it is comfortable with very loud bangs and it's excited because the bang is linked with the retrieve. You've also got to couple that excitement and positivity for the bang and the retrieve with control. Again, this is why it's more and more complicated and there's more and more layers and sequencing. But the first time with the next bird dog I train, the first time I hold a shotgun up and shoot it, I'll already have that dog set up to be looking for the retrieve off the bang and to be excited and positive and confident with it. And I'll use a remote launcher. If you don't have a remote launcher, you could use either a handheld launcher and get a friend to shoot that, or you could get a friend to throw the dummy, or you need two people. One person shoots the gun and the other person throws the dummy. But the very first time I shoot a shotgun over the next bird dog I train, there'll also be a dummy going out at the same time. So the very first time that dog ever sees a shotgun fired, it's already marking off the gun. That's a classic sequencing thing. Another classic sequencing thing in retriever training, which is just a good example to use in dog training, talking about sequencing, in bird dog training and retrieving, you've got the crossing or the crossover where the dog has to, where a bird lands on the other side of water. Now, so the dog's got to get in the water, swim all the way across the water, climb out on the bank on the other side, find the bird, climb back in the water, swim across the water, and come back over to you. Relatively well-known thing in retriever training, you train your crossings before you train your water retrieve. Sequencing. You're doing the hardest and most important thing first. It's part of doing the worst first. Doing the worst first. Here's a note here. A lot of it is also doing the worst first, but it's more complex than that. There are a lot more variables when you get into scent, aversion, retrieves, and more complex scenarios in dog training. It's more complex than just doing the worst first. Going back to teaching the crossing in a retriever, if you think the crossing's harder, right? So you would get your dog confident in retrieving out of the water before you do your crossings. But what happens is if you do tons of water retrieves with the dog and you always throw it in the water and the dog gets used to jumping in the water, finding the dummy in the water, and then coming back to you, and then swimming out and climbing onto the bank to you, the first time, and you do a lot of that and get that really ingrained, the first time you throw a dummy all the way across the water and it lands on the other side, and even if the dog watches it land on the other side, it's so used to getting it out of the water that it gets in the water and it swims around in circles in the water and it sort of knows it's on the bank on the other side, but it always gets it out of the water and it'll swim around in circles, and then it's done lots of land retrieves too, because you do a lot of those before you do water retrieves, and it gets up on the bank on the other side, but it's not used to climbing back into the water, and the whole thing's very complicated for a dog. Dogs are actually very simple machines, and mentally. And some very basic variables and variations can make things very, very difficult for them. Far harder than what they need to be. And once you put a dog in a place like that, mentally, through poor sequencing and doing things wrong, you have to do huge amounts of work to fix that issue and try to get the dog into the right place mentally and get the right chain of sequencing even happening mentally for the dog. But even when you do tons and tons of work till you get to the point where the dog does it correctly a few times in training, and even then out in the field, it only takes the right, or in this case, the wrong variables to pop up in the wrong combinations again later on in the field for it to get back into that confused situation again. And it can all rear its ugly head again later on. So sequencing, and again, I've talked about chaining, how everything in dog training is chaining, and you're actually developing chains and patterns mentally in the dog's head. You're actually developing these patterns, and the dog learns these habits, and they get very ingrained in the dog's head of how they react to certain things as they happen. And once they're in there, it's bloody hard. You can never erase them. They're always there. You can try to overpower them with new patterns, but they're still always there. And after that, the dog's trying to control them, and now they're double thinking and going backwards and forwards. So that's why sequencing is so important. It really is. It's really freaking important. And that's how, again, talking about chaining, talking about training and steps, it all becomes the same stuff. A lot of these principles, doing the worst first, again, the principle from the blueprint of doing the worst first, that's part of sequencing. Training and steps is sequencing. Sequencing and chaining is very similar. Chaining is sort of part of sequencing, or it's a different way of describing it and talking about it. But as far as, would it affect my pup if I did my non-target species aversion training with possums and rabbits before I do my scent work with deerskin? Yes, could affect it massively. And everything in the deer dog training blueprint is in sequence perfectly. And there's to the point where there's some things that it would be nice in some ways to start training them earlier, but we're going to make more important and more difficult things to train more difficult. So there's some things that are left till later. The aversion training is a really massive example of that. Training the heel last is a massive example of that. I've talked about this before a lot in Q&As and things, that that was a real breakthrough for me. In the post I made in a circle talking about, there was a few things for me that fell into place training the last couple of dogs, deer dogs that I trained before I made the deer dog training blueprint, that really fell into place, that really pulled everything together, and I was starting to wrap my head around sequencing. And again, I had it in my head, but I've never really written it out or explained it or spoken about it in this way. And that was training heel last. Training heel last. So many people talk about the first thing you do with a dog is train heel. And I've done a lot of that. And training, you put a really good heel on a dog and then try to train it to walk in front, but slow and close in front with a range, and you make that 10 times harder. And you always get your dog stuck between this back and forth thing. As soon as I completely forgot about heel, got walking in front, set up perfectly, heel's easy to do later. Real easy. Sequencing. Really bloody important. I I had something else there too. Oh, yeah, and there are a couple of dogs there early on, but before Fly was actually the first dog that I did basically everything that's in the blueprint with. After working with tons and tons of dogs for years and years. And there was even a couple of things with Fly that I realized, okay, I did that and it worked really well. I'll tweak it just a little bit, and that's how I'll do it in the blueprint. But what happened there with Fly and actually Indy, another dog, and a few other dogs before that period too, is I worked out the last few things, and I got in my head to the point of what eventually went into the blueprint, into the deer dog training blueprint. What happened with Miko was the exact same thing. A couple of things, and that's why I scrapped the bird dog boot camp, because a couple of things that happened with Miko, and I worked out how I would do it so much better next time. That's why I had to scrap the bird dog boot camp, because I was like, that's not even how I want to do it. So I've got to completely scrap all of that and do it all over again. And that's what will go into the bird dog training blueprint. It won't be the bird dog boot camp. It'll be the bird dog training blueprint. And I did everything with Miko that'll go into the bird dog blueprint, but some of the sequencing was off. And man, it's make or break. Sequencing is make or break. It's huge. Again, this is actually a pretty good sentence. You can do all of the right things in the wrong order, and you can make your job 100 times harder to never get the end result you could have easily gotten by doing the right things properly in the right order. You can do the right things in the wrong order and it doesn't work. You do the right things in the right order and it does work really well. Ash and Jesse. Hi, Paul. I've got a 5-month-old pup, strong-eyed heading dog. Everything is going really well except doing stock training with cattle. She gets her hackles up and barks and wants to attack. I've been giving her strong command of disapproval and a check on the long line, but it doesn't seem to faze her. Around sheep, she has no worries at all and can train drills, etc. She has the same thing with goats. I'm worried that this is going to continue through to hunting, and I'm worried she might do this on deer. What's the best way of dealing with this? Or is it a coincidence? Or is it a confidence issue? She shows similar responses to other dogs as well. Thanks, Ash. So I'm just reading a couple more notes here. So my notes here are, that's really unusual. Something seems amiss. Sounds like something has caused this. Or something has caused this or is causing it. So either something has happened or something's continuing to happen. It could be a serious issue for sure, and you're going to have to sort it out. So basically the dog's just full on around cows. I've been giving her a strong command of disapproval and a check on the long line, but it doesn't seem to faze her. Let me just read on a bit here, because then Dave said, I have a strong-eyed heading dog and my experience was the same as yours around cattle. This is Dave replying to Ash and Jesse's comment in the Big Game Indicating Dogs Inner Circle. Dave says, I've got a strong-eyed heading dog and my experience was the same as yours around cattle. It didn't seem to matter how much pressure I put on her, but she slowly come right. When the cows start moving towards her or she feels threatened by them, if they get too close, that's when it seems to happen to me. So I just try to keep her close to me as we walk through and keep everything calm. I normally wait for the farmer next door to shift his cows onto new grass so they're busy eating and not so focused on us. If she does run at them, I would put a lot of pressure on her. Don't know if that's any help. Yeah, so so it's pretty important that, and my notes back at Ash and Jesse's comment is, are you doing it through a fence to start with? What are the cows like? What's happening with the dogs? And my notes are, it could be an overall issue where she is getting too much freedom somewhere else and that is transferring over. You tack on the end there that she's doing it with other dogs like it's not a big deal, but that's a huge red flag for me. Not sure what's going on here, but you definitely need to get to the bottom of it. So yeah, I'm wondering how you're doing it when you say having problems with my dog and cows. She gets her hackles up, wants to bark, wants to attack. I've got a note here talk about the principle of taking a step back in training. You know, when we first introduce our dogs to cows in the blueprint, we do it through a fence. So the cows are on the other side of the fence. The cows can't get to us. The dog can't get to the cows. The dog doesn't feel threatened. It's very easy and chill. And it tends to go pretty smoothly. And if the dog does try to charge or bark, we've got the long line on, check on the long line. And it tends to just be a repetition thing. And, you know, we get, I've always had my dogs super chill around cows relatively easily. We get videos sent through Instagram and Facebook quite regularly of like people's dogs laying on the ground with cows sniffing, you know, walking right up to them and sniffing them while they're sitting down and stuff like that. So I'm wondering if something's a little bit off there. And would just remind you about the principle of taking a step back in training when things go bad. So if you started off super chill with the cows on the other side of the fence, and everything was real easy, and then as you tried to progress forward and go into the same paddock with the cows, if the cows walk up to you and the dog reacts and it doesn't go well, then I would go back to getting a fence between me and the cows again. What Dave is saying is really good. You know, he's just sticking with it. He's thinking about it and doing it carefully and putting in the work. You know, he's saying he had the same thing with his dog, so he started thinking about it, trying to do it in different ways, try to make it easier. Doing it when the farmers just shifted the cows, so they're busy eating grass. That's why I say I wonder what are the cows like, because that could be another thing too. If you've got a bolshy full-on cow that always walks up to your dog, then your dog could pick up on that vibe and start wanting to target that cow a bit. I've got that out here. We've got two pretty friendly cows out in the paddock here, and Miko stalks them and really interested in them and that. And there's one black cow out here that's real chill, and she doesn't care about Miko, and Miko doesn't care about her. But there's a younger black and white one that anytime Miko comes out, she's looking at Miko and she walks up to Miko, and she's even, you know, sort of walks up to Miko all staunch and has a bit of a jump around at her, and they've got a bit of a thing going on. And Miko, when she goes out in the paddock now, all she's thinking about is that black and white cow sneaking up to her, and the black and white cow's the same with Miko. So you've got to watch out if you've got a bit of a grumpy cow, or the cow's trying to eye up the dog and staunch it out a little bit. The dog could get a bit of a thing with that one cow, and it might be worth trying to work with another cow or work on the other side of a fence or something like that. The other thing I'd say here too is, where are we? you can come up with these anomalies where a dog just has a strange sticking point or interest or habit. Even when you've done everything right, you just have a dog that just, for whatever reason, it's just the dog's temperament. And the first time it ever sees a cow, it's all full on and hackled up and jumpy and barky. And you're like, shit, I've got this thing with this dog, and it's going to take a bit more work. You can get those things, and every dog has something. Generally, most dogs have something. They can be really good with everything, but then you just have one annoying little sticking point that you're going to have to work harder at. And when you get those things, you have to do what Dave's done and get a bit creative and try to think of ways to make it easier. Same with the thing with the other dogs. If your dog's barking and getting grumpy with other dogs, you need to get creative and work with that too. And sometimes it's just a case of really being disciplined and diligent with it and doing a lot of work with it and just working your way through it. And it might be a little bit of a freaking niggly thing forever, and you've got to put the work in now to get on top of it and get it as good as you can and manage it, and it should get better and better as your dog gets older. Like Print with his dog thing that he's had, I'm just going to check my camera real quick, guys. Yep, we're good. It's still rolling. Next question, Chris. Hi there, I have a 12-month-old GSP lab cross. He's going well and we are enjoying the blueprint. One thing that's doing my head in is when we go to new spots, he starts out really good, but gradually gets more and more excited until he's not really listening anymore. I do a lot of turns and make sure he's not running the show, but he's just so animated and moving all over the place. He literally gets a froth on. The constant turns do seem to help. I assume it's because it's a new environment and he's just excited, and his age as well. 12 months old, especially GSP cross, they can still be pretty damn goofy by then. Can I assume he's going to settle and just keep doing what I'm doing, or do I need to do something more? If I get really angry, he responds and settles down. You almost answered your whole question yourself there. We have another dog whose temperament is way more relaxed. She's a Huntaway Kelpie cross. The dog I'm doing the blueprint with is a real handful. I assume some of it is to do with the breed too, definitely. GSPs can take a lot of work, and I've spoken about this before. A lot of people think, Labradors can be nice, calm dogs, so I'll cross it, and GSPs can be full on, so I'll cross a GSP with a Labrador, and I'll have like a half mix. Like, they're trying to cross the two good things. They're trying to, GSPs can be nice and sneaky and have a point, but they can be full on, and Labradors can be a little bit goofy and loud, but they have a nice, calm temperament. What often happens when you cross them, you just intensify all of the negatives that you are trying to cancel out, and you end up with a really full-on but noisy and goofy, super full-on cross. It doesn't always, it doesn't really work the way you want it to work often when you cross dogs. You don't just get a chill GSP, you don't just get a sneaky lab, you get a full-on goofy GSP lab cross. Sometimes they get more intense. Breeding dogs is a whole other topic on its own. My notes on this is you basically answered your whole question at the end there. It sounds like you need to be way firmer with that dog, because you say that you've got all these issues, the dog's been silly, and then you say, if I get really angry, he responds and settles down. Angry wouldn't be the word that I would use, but it does sound there, and this whole thing, that you just need to be far more firm and consistent with that dog. Far more firm. you say, can I assume he's going to settle and just keep doing what I'm doing, or do I need to do something more? I would say you can't assume that he's going to settle. You can assume that him being a dork is going to become more ingrained and more of a habit, and will carry on through into hunting and adulthood and all of that. And you really need to knuckle down with them. It might be, again, too much freedom and a lack of structure outside of training, transferring into training. You say you've got this hunt away Kelpie that's been really good, really easy, very relaxed, and this dog's really full on. Maybe you got away with a really relaxed, easy dog. You can get away with a lot less structure outside of training. With a full-on dork of a dog, you need to be even more structured outside of training, and you need to be even more firm and extremely consistent. That's really what it comes down to with those really full-on dogs. I definitely would never tell you that you say, when I get really angry, he responds and settles down. You don't want to be angry in dog training. One of the worst things you can do. But what you can do is be extremely consistent. You've got all of the techniques in the blueprint there with the long line, and being able to say sit, and you can stand on the long line after you say sit, and you can step in and push the dog's bum down. With a dog like that, you need to be extremely firm and consistent. You say sit, and sit means sit and stay sitting until told to go, and there's no frickin' compromises. If you give them an inch to move, they'll take a mile. And what you say has to go, and you can't get angry. You need to stay firm but calm, and just be assertive and calm and clear. Really, really important. Some of those full-on dogs can be really freaking smart too. GSPs and Vizslers can be really, really smart. And they can try to hold this certain small amount of dominance in training, where you say sit and they'll sit, but then they'll wriggle a little bit to the left. And as long as every time they're wriggling a little bit to the left, in their head, they're like, no, I'm not doing what he's told me to. And then that leaks through and bleeds into everything else. You need to cut out all of the bullshit. The amount of times that I get a question like this, and I'm following the blueprint and I'm doing this or that, and my dog just doesn't listen. It's a dork all the time. And we do a one-on-one, and I say, okay, show me your stop drill. And they say sit. And when they say sit, the dog just spazzes out and like comes over to them and turns around and bumps into their legs and walks all over their feet. And then they say sit, no, sit, 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 sit. And the dog's like wriggling all over their feet and bumping into them and half sitting but going around in circles. And they say sit, sit, sit. And then the dog finally sort of half sits, but then it's like ass is near the ground, but it's walking towards them, and it's all over the place, and it's just a mess. And I'm like, okay, that's not a sit command. You really need to cut out all the bullshit. Really important. And I've talked about this a lot. There's so much more to that sit command than teaching a dog to sit. We are doing that, and the stop in dog training and hunting and control is your most important thing. That's your anchor, that's your stop, that's your command that can cut any bad situation off at the pass and stop it before it even happens. But the quality of the end result of your sit all comes from all that little bullshit that a dog can do inside a stop drill. Shifting its weight from side to side, wriggling forward a little bit, walking around in a circle before it sits, taking a step towards you before it sits. You know, there's all of these freaking things. You get that stop drill like airtight, where if the dog's 5 meters away and you say sit, it just sits there and it does not frickin' move until you tell it to go. And going back to the start of this Q&A and talking about having training fun, calm, relaxed, positive, constructive, you get a dog to the point where you say, and you don't even have to say sit, you just say sit, just with that plain neutral tone, sit, and the dog just sits. And not only does it sit, it's not loathing it, it's not sitting down and like, you know, rolling its eyes to look up at you. When you get a dog that you just say sit, and it sits, and it's happy, and you can see it in the dog. It's happy. It's happy to sit, and everything's clean, and you can walk something a little. You can increase the distraction. You can clap your hands and fire a shot and throw a stick, throw a ball. You can have another dog there and call the other dog to you, and your dog, that dog that you've told to sit, it sat where you told it to. It sat right where you said, where you first said. It didn't move. It's not lurching and twitching and wriggling and turning and moving. And it's not loathing it either. And it's not showing like any silly body language. It's not, you know what I mean? Really important. So just what you said there with all those issues that you're having and the dog getting a froth on and being all silly and he responds when you get angry. I know 100% you've got a lot of shit to work out there, and it's all that stuff that I just said. And you know, it all comes down to consistency and, you know, perfect execution of all of the techniques. You know, of all your reading and timing and stepping in and out and your body language and the application and releasing of pressure and praise, the use of the long line, keeping the tension out of the long line, the timing of your checks, the tension going straight back out of the lead as soon as the dog's doing the right thing. Getting proper eye contact before you get the release, before you give the dog the release. All of those things, your body language, your tone. You know, if you are relaxed in training, you know, it's the whole package. And you know, one trainer can take a dog like that, a full-on dog, and in a matter of weeks, get that dog to the point where it's actually quite calm and relaxed and happy in training, all through good execution and tone and timing and everything, all of that stuff that I just explained. Another trainer can take that dog and through poor tone, poor timing, poor execution, poor management and structure outside of training, that dog can just be a wound up, tense shambles. That's like acting out and biting the long line and flipping around on its back and just being an absolute idiot. You can take a dog like that and do the right stuff with it for 6 weeks and it's a totally different freaking dog. It's all what you do with them. 100%. Some dogs are harder than others. But often those dogs that are harder like that are the best dogs when you train them properly. They really are. Often those easy cruisy dogs, you know, are easier and they're good. But those full-on dogs, if you can get them right, they can be really bloody good. John, hey Paul, I'm sorry to hear your knee is holding you back. I've been off for 2.5 months and counting with a problem with my Achilles. I'm not too concerned with my dog picking up where we left off, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on dog training while you're injured. What can you do for training? What can you do for training when you're not very mobile? How does a break affect the outcome? Any of your thoughts would be great. I hope you're well soon. Yeah, the knees way better. I think I haven't been for a hunt for a while, for a few weeks, but the last hunt it was pretty good. It feels better since then. I'm about to go for a hunt in the next couple of days, and I'm hoping my knee's like 100% now, but I don't really know till I give it a good workover. It's been a real balance of like wanting to strengthen it and get it stronger, but then the nature of the issue I've got with it, this tendon thing, is resting it is what makes it better too. So it's been a real sort of dance back and forth. But so John has this issue with his Achilles tendon. He's not very mobile. What's my advice on training? So my notes here are just do as much as you can, and pups and dogs will handle breaks well. It's actually surprising how if you started off on the right foot, doing everything correctly, and you're talking about structure and routine and management outside of training, as long as you keep doing all of that, as long as you don't let your dog start doing a heap of crazy stuff, it's amazing if you keep doing the routine and management things well, the day-to-day stuff, and keep that structure there. It's amazing how well, if you just don't train but keep your structure right, how you can have a massive long break and go back to training, and the pup or dog just picks up as good as gold, as like it hasn't even had the break. They often come back better because they're older. They've still got all the training that you've given them in the past in place, but they're now more mature, and they often come back. I've had this before with dogs, even with older dogs, like once a dog gets to say 5 years old and then I haven't hunted them much for about a year, and then I'm like, man, I've barely hunted this dog for about a year. They're a really good finished full-on hunting dog at 5 years old, and then they have like a year off and you take them out when they're 6 and they're way better just because they're an older dog and they're more mature. They've got more going on between the ears. They're smarter, but they've got all the old experience. It's just like, imagine us, if you think about something that you got really good at when you were, say, a kid, but you only ever got so good. Imagine if you can go back and start again when you're like 40. You're so much wiser as an older person. You'd just be like, you look back at mistakes and stuff that you used to do when you were younger and go, man, that was silly. If I could do that all over again, I'll be much better at it now. That's exactly the same with dogs. And dogs, everything's happening so much faster with dogs. 1 year in human years is 7 years to a dog, and you do see that come through as well. You look at how much they can age and mature and learn, and even physically, get better. So much more ability physically in the space of a couple of months. You look at like a 3-month-old pup compared to a 5-month-old pup. There's just so much happening, and that fast transition is happening physically and mentally too. And it's amazing how they can come back from a break even better, and how well they can handle a break as well, even while you're training. And another note I've got here is it's more important what the dog doesn't experience during a break than what it does experience. So, and that just goes back to that control and structure and routine outside of training. So as long as you keep everything tidy, and the pup or dog outside of training isn't running around doing all this crazy stuff, and you keep everything pretty tidy there, you'll be surprised how good you can come back after a break. And another note I've got here is just spend time engaging with your pup if you can't train it, because that's another real important thing about training, particularly with a structured system like the Deer Dog Training Blueprint, where the pup or dog does spend a lot of time crated or in a kennel, and we use training as a really important part of the engagement that we have with our pup or dog. If you're injured and unable to train, I would give my pup or dog freedom sessions and things like that, and I would even just either go outside with the pup or bring it inside with me and just spend time. I'd sit down on the floor and just spend time with the pup, just sitting with it, patting it. Just engagement and working on that bond and relationship as much as I could is important too. Alex, hey Paul, I've been doing the blueprint since June last year with my GSP and really enjoying it. He was doing really well, and we finished the series a couple of weeks ago as my firearms license finally came through. We went on our first hunt on Friday and yesterday and had a bit of an unfortunate experience. After 6 hours following the dog, we bumped into some deer up close while tracking a ground scent. Then followed up on the deer. Oh, we bumped some deer, so I'm guessing you were tracking some ground scent and you spooked some deer. Then you followed up on the deer and come across them in a clearing. The dog didn't know they were there because the wind wasn't right. I stopped and had a deer in the sights. The dog, after about 10 seconds, wandered into the clearing, saw the deer, they saw him and bolted, and he bolted after them. I called and he come straight back, all stoked. I didn't really tell him off as I didn't know what to do and was pleased he came back. Obviously feeling pretty disappointed, especially after a year plus of training. I was really surprised he didn't naturally lock up as Print did in the blueprint, and also he didn't just stop and wait for me as per 100% of the rest of the time. Do you have any advice about how to turn that around? So my notes here is, first things first, this isn't a huge deal. We'll talk about quite a few key things here that come to mind, and we'll come back to this. But first things, this isn't a big disaster and you'll be fine. It's honestly not, man. So like, if we look at it, I get it that the first deer that your dog's seen is broken and chased them, and you're just like, oh man, that was the last thing I wanted. And I mean, it's not the last. Like, the last thing would have been your dog broke and chased them, and you called and he didn't come back, and the dog like took off and chased them for half an hour or something crazy. Or there's loads of way worse things that can happen than a dog breaking for like 2 seconds until you're like, Zook, come here, and he comes back, and you're like, really, you spooked the deer and the dog broke, but he come back when you called him. Way worse things can happen than that. It's pretty cool that you tracked deer. Sounds like your dog was tracking and you followed the dog, and your dog took you straight to deer, and you spooked them, and then you tracked them again and found them again. That's pretty cool. You said you had them in your sights, and after 10 seconds, the dog wandered onto the clearing. I want to ask you why you didn't shoot one. 10 seconds is a bloody long time when you're talking about like bush stalking deer. But there's obviously safety stuff. You might not have had a clear shot. You might have been looking at a hind and you wanted to shoot a stag and all these things. But particularly early on, it is bloody important. And safety trumps everything, okay? I'm not telling you to hurry up and shoot a deer like the second you see it. Safety always goes over top of everything. Identifying your target, getting a safe and ethical shot as well, getting a good shot angle. And I know sometimes you see an animal in the bush, you have the deer in your sights, and sometimes it can take bloody ages. It's on the wrong angle, or there's a tree in the way, and you're like mucking around for like a minute or two trying to get a shot. Or sometimes you never get the shot. But that would be one thing there is, if your dog's early on, man, if your dog takes you to a deer and you get a chance to put a good shot on one, do it and do it quick and get that deer on the ground and get that positive experience for your dog. It's not a huge deal, man. Your dog, it sounds like the wind obviously wasn't right. I know you did say something about that there was no wind that day. And if your dog didn't know the deer were there, you're obviously following a ground scent. That might have been a side wind. You've seen the deer, you're trying to get the shot. The dog's wandered onto the clearing, spooked the deer. The dog might not have locked up. I mean, it's just, you said the dog didn't know they were there and just wandered onto the clearing, and next thing the deer spooked and the dog took off and you called and it come back. So something's happened. The dog's just like, holy shit. And the dog's tracking the deer, so he knows they're there somewhere. As soon as the deer took off, the dog would have instantly gone, there they are, and they're leaving, so, and we're trying to get them, so let's go. And you've called it back and it's come straight back. So that's actually a good bit of experience in itself. Nick, because you had, and this is why training's so freaking important, having such a solid base, because in talking about before, having a good recall and a stop command and having that solid base, you're saying, man, I'm so disappointed that this happened after a year of training. Man, this happened because of a year of training. If you didn't have that structure of training, that year of training, with a GSP, I'm guessing he's 12 or 15 months old. Man, a 12 or 15 month old male GSP with a deer breaking in front of him without that training, you probably wouldn't have seen that dog for some people never see the dog ever again, not even kidding. That dog ends up getting lost in the bush that day and turns up like a week later somewhere because it just ends up chasing deer for like a week. So in a lot of ways, like I definitely wouldn't be down in the dumps about it, man. And I know how hard things can be like that. Like, man, I've had so many experiences over and over and over, starting right as a kid. I started hunting with dogs at 7 years old, literally, with an ear rifle and Labradors, like shooting sparrows and starlings and possums and rabbits and stuff. And right on down the line, by the time I was 11, I had my first 12 gauge and I was shooting possums and rabbits and game birds and ducks and all of that with Labradors, and not very well trained ones either. And man, if you want to talk about frustrating experiences with dogs, that's where a lot of what I do today, comes from, is from having all of those bad experiences, man. I remember one experience. I remember so vividly. It's just burned into my mind, and it's that experience and lots of other experiences like that when I had to break away from hunting for a few years in my early 20s, and then I got back into it in my real full on, like living full time in the bush, hunting and trapping. And it was experiences like that I knew that's when I really started studying dog training. I knew a lot about dogs. I'd been around dogs a lot. I'd had good dogs. I'd had okay dogs. I'd had a lot of shit dogs too. But I knew, in my mid-20s, I wanted to get another dog and I wanted it to be good. But I knew they don't get good on their own. And I knew other people knew how to train them really good because I'd seen that too. And I wanted to work it out, and that's where it all came from. But I remember, and that's when I went on this journey of studying dog training and getting dogs and working on them and making mistakes and screwing up sequencing, and so trying to fix that, and then that didn't work, and then getting another dog and doing it better and better and better over years and years. That on top of starting when I was 7. And making all the mistakes and learning all the hard way, and then eventually working out how to do everything right. And that took frickin' years too. But I remember one night, I remember the paddock I was in and everything. I remember everything. I must have been about, I'll put up a photo. I'll put up a photo on my Instagram of me at that age and that dog, because I've got a photo. And I used to do a lot of spotlighting when I was a kid. Actually, at this time, I believe I must have been, because I actually got a 12, my dad gave me a 12 gauge shotgun when I was 11, and he wouldn't let me use a 22 till I was much older because he thought, and it's probably not a, he's probably had a point, was that a shotgun, once those pellets have traveled 50 odd yards, they're not doing much damage. If I shot a possum out of a tree with a shotgun, or I shot a rabbit, or if I shot something with a shotgun, those pellets weren't going to go too far, and after a certain distance, they weren't going to do much damage. But a kid walking around in Waikato farmland with a 22, you fire that shot, especially shooting possums out of trees and stuff, those bullets are going for hundreds of meters, and they can still put a hole in something when they land. So, and in this photo, I had a 22, and I didn't get a 20. My dad didn't let me start using the 22 till I was about 13 or 14, but I'm about that age. And I used to do a lot of spotlighting possums and rabbits, right? I actually started when I was on my own, probably when I was about 11 or 12, going out with a spotlight at night on the farm and shooting possums and rabbits. And I had this dog, a really nice little black Labrador bitch, and I didn't train her. We didn't train dogs when we were a kid, when I was growing up. Neither did my dad. You just got a dog, and you just started shooting stuff over it and worked at it, tried to work it out as it went, and you yelled at it when it did something wrong, and you patted it when it did something right. And most of the time it didn't work well at all. And some of the time it was a complete freaking disaster. But this one dog she was sort of halfway in between being good and a complete disaster. This black lab, beautiful little dog. And I remember there was a big hare, like a big rabbit out in the middle of a paddock. And I was probably using the shotgun. And I saw him like 100 meters away in the spotlight. And what I used to do with possums and rabbits, with rabbits and hares out in the middle of big paddocks, possums, you generally just walk up to them with a shotgun and blast them out of the tree, piece of cake. But rabbits and hares can be more difficult to get close enough to with a shotgun to get inside shotgun range. And I used to spot them, and then I'd take the spotlight off them and slowly and quietly walk. You see them about 100 meters away, and you go, okay, they're there. And sometimes you'd even turn the spotlight off, or I'd hold it against my jersey, against my chest, so it was blocking out most of the light, just a little bit of light, and just enough light to walk so I could see in front of me. And I just really quietly walk, and you gain about 20-30 meters, and so you lift the light up, and it's still there. And then you block the light and walk a bit closer, and block the light and walk a bit closer. Another thing, and then usually what I'd do as I got closer, it was a Lifelight as a brand of spotlight here in New Zealand. They probably, I don't know if it was a New Zealand brand or what it was, but there's these old school Lifelights. Any old school New Zealand hunter will know them. And I remember actually when dry cell batteries come out, that was a big improvement, because even before that, you used to carry like a car battery with the liquid acid in it, so you couldn't tip it up in like a backpack with a Lifelight. And you were real flash when you got a dry cell battery. But and I put the Lifelight on my head. It had a big headband on it, but it was a big grunty spotlight. It was like a big glass bulb, and with a big heavy head strap on it. And I had it sorted, so I just put it on the angle, and even with the 22, I just put it on the angle in the right spot on my head, and I could shoot deer, possums and rabbits, and later on it was deer, but I could shoot possums and rabbits and things with the Lifelight on my head. And I put it on my head, and I was getting closer to this hare, and I was almost within shotgun range. And sometimes as I got close and I'd have the gun closed and up to my shoulder, and I'd have the spotlight shining up into the ear, because if you just put the light real hard on them, that would often make them run. And I'd shine the light up into the ear, so the edge of the light was just lighting up the rabbit or hare's eye, so I could just see where it was. And then I'd just quietly start walking towards it. And if it ran with the shotgun, sometimes you get just inside shotgun range and you're like, yeah, it's there now, but I'll try to get a few meters closer. And if it ran, you could just swing onto it and shoot it as it ran with the shotgun. Quite often too, they'd let you get right into shotgun range and you could lower the light right onto them and just blast them while they sat there, you know. And I was doing that, and I had this Labrador in it heel, you know, but it wasn't a properly trained heel. I can't even remember what exactly I'd done with that dog, but basically untrained, just the good old Kiwi. You still see people say it, just take them hunting, mate. It's just time on the hill. We've just got to take them hunting. And I'm closing in on this here, and I've got this lab in beside me, and it all sort of happened at the same time. And she'd already done this. She'd done a couple of different things leading up to that point where she'd screwed a couple of things up, you know. She'd gone out of range and flushed a pheasant too far away so I couldn't shoot it, you know, and I'd bloody screamed at her and get in here, and you get really pissed off. And, you know, this is just the classic epitome example of doing everything wrong. And no training, no structure, and then just getting mad when everything doesn't work out right. And so I was already mad at this dog, and I was a little pretty wary of her, and I told her off, and I thought I had her sorted. She had big growlings and all of that. And I'm getting in on this here, and I'm almost there, but nowhere near in shotgun range either. And or getting close though, but getting a bit on the edge. And if you've done a lot of shotgun shooting, you know what happens when you shoot at something that's too far away. You just don't bloody hit it. You can do the perfect shot, bang, get right, bead right on it, boom, and the thing just keeps running. And I'm getting in on this thing, and it's crouching down, sitting tight. And sometimes before they take off, they'll be sitting tight as a rabbit or a hare does, and they'll like sit up, take 2 hops, but then stop. And now they're sitting up high like that. And this hare did that, but it stopped. And all I needed to do was like take another 5 steps, and I was going to blast it. And this Labrador saw that hare sit up and take 2 steps and then stop, and she broke. And then the hare broke, and then I tried to shoot the hare over the dog, but it was just outside of shotgun range, so I put the bead right on it, boom, and the hare kept running, and the dog kept chasing it. And that dog's name was Canine, classic kid name for a dog. And I screamed her name, Canine! And she didn't even flinch. She was still flat stick running after this dog. And I just screamed her name over and over and over. And she just kept chasing the hare, like next paddock over, like blasted through the next fence. And I was just completely lost my rag and just flipped out because she'd screwed up a few other things leading up to that. So I was already in a bad mood. And then she just like textbook completely screwed that hare up. And I'm just screaming at her. And she's still just chasing this hare round and round in circles. And I was just like, and then I had to chase her down, and it was cold night, so I'm all in my swan dry and stuff. And next thing I'm chasing this dog, and then I'm all hot, and I've got to take my spotlight off and swan dry off, and it's all this big bloody mess. I give him a dog this massive big toweling off, and I just didn't even want to hunt anymore. And I'm right up the back of the farm, walking all the way back down the farm, back to the house, just totally pissed. And and I've had a lot more other experiences with dogs like that, and even more serious ones where things have got, you know, even as in growing up as a kid, where I've seen hunting dogs and farm dogs and stuff that people didn't train, and then things went bad and people are beating the hell out of dogs, and then shooting dogs, like, shoot that bloody dog, it's a bloody useless dog, I hate that dog. They never trained it. They never trained it, you know, and now they're beating the hell out of it and shooting it and end up killing it, you know, and it was never the dog's fault. But you know, and you're so far off any of that, man. As far as like, you're like, oh man, I'm disappointed. You know, what happened with you, and same as with that dog. If I had trained it and she had broken on that hair, and I'd have been able to go, canine, and she had to stop, and she stopped, and the hair just went running away, she would have realized, oh, if I break and chase and spook them, I'm going to get yelled at and it's going to get away. You know, and if a dog breaks like that, then you'd go back and do more training and be more careful about it next time, and then keep it all tidy, keep it controlled and structured, go back out, shoot more stuff over her. Training with success is one of our principles. If you train a dog to carry out the certain hunting activity in the right way, in the way that we train them to do it, and then you go out and they hunt that way, and you actually end up shooting stuff, then they go, okay, that's how we're going to do it then. That works. Sometimes dogs just try stuff too. Almost every dog will do exactly what your dog did then, at least once, sometime in their career. You know, I've got that video of Print thinking about it. It's in the end of the blueprint now, with that stag down south in the riverbed, and that roaring stag, and I've got Print on the stop out in front of me, and that stag comes right up to us and walks past, and I didn't shoot it, and the stag goes galloping back past Print, and Print stands up and sort of starts off with a slow walk, almost a stalk, and then as the stag gets further away, Print sort of breaks into a bit of a trot, and I just say, Print! And he stops and comes back. That's our training working, you know, and without it, you haven't got anything. And everything's just a disaster and everything falls apart. But when you've got it, you can at least handle the dog and guide it through situations like that. So yeah, I don't think, you know, what you've had there is a disaster at all, man. I've had stuff like that, and I know it's freaking annoying. It really can burn, man. When you've been sneaking and hunting for all day, 6 hours, and really trying, and then you step the wrong way, your dog steps the wrong way right at the last minute, you zig when you should have zagged, and the deer runs away, and that's your chance lost for the day. Man, I've had that bloody hunting 10 days straight, and then at the end of the 10th day, the dog's tracking all afternoon, and you track an animal for 2 hours, and finally you see it, and in one moment you spook it and it runs away, and it's just soul destroying. It really can be, man. And hunting can be a real, you know, a really full on like that. But that's what makes it so good. You know, and when you do finally get it right, and your dog does do everything right and everything's tidy, and you finally get the deer and you shoot the deer, that's what makes it so satisfying too. If it was easy, it wouldn't mean much, you know, but that's why it's so coveted and why it's so awesome when it does all go off correctly. So, yeah, I would say it's not a big deal. You've done everything right, and you just got to stay on the horse and keep going back out and keep going, and shoot some deer and just stick with it. Yeah, if that was your first hunt and you got that close on your first hunt, that's doing really well. It really is. Some people hunt for years without shooting a deer. It sounds like you almost shot one on your first go. So if you stick at it, it's not going to be long before you pull it all together. And if your dog's a bit of a handful, chuck it on the long line and get it dragging a long line around. Have a good look at the last half hour of part 12 of the blueprint. Have a good watch of all of that stuff. On managing your dog when you're hunting, and if your dog pushes its range a bit or does something like that or is a bit of a handful, that last half hour of part 12 is all on that. And keep us posted. We want a photo of you with your dog and a dead deer. Josh. Hi, Paul. I'm yet to get a dog, but I've made my way through the whole blueprint already. Tested it out on the kids and it's working well. Okay. Can't recommend that, but I think we're joking there. We have decided the best dog for me and the family is a Vizsla. I know a breeder and he has offered me the pick of the litter. The pups are yet to be born. You go into what to look for in a pup in the blueprint, but I am wondering if you or anyone can give me more advice on what to look for since I can choose any of the pups. Also, the breeder is not a hunter. Is there anything I should be asking him to do or to not do with my pup before I take him home? He mentioned that his kids and grandkids spend a lot of time with the pups when they are born. Could this be an issue? If I'm overthinking all of this, just say so. There could be a little bit of overthinking in it, but it's, getting a dog, it's a big deal. It's a 10-year deal. Like and that's what this is all about, is asking questions and like digging right into it. So it's all good. But my notes on this is there's not much I can say here about choosing a pup that isn't in the blueprint. You say we go over it briefly. There is quite a bit in the first part of part 12 about it and talking about going for that that quiet pup or the middle of the range type pup for a deer dog, not the real full-on pup. It's good that you've got a particular breed picked out. That's good. That's big part of the battle of choosing a pup. You've got your breed. It's good that you've got the pick of the litter too. A big part of advice here is choose the pup you like. That's a real big one and a real common and old school saying and dog training and with dogs and hunting dogs and things is it's really important to get the pup you like. Like that's why I say it's good that you've got a breed picked out. It's awesome that you get the pick of the litter. You've got that info in the blueprint there on and showing what print did to make me choose him and choosing the quiet pup and all of that sort of stuff. There's plenty in there about that. A Vizsla's right is a good breed. It's right. It's a hunting dog. It's a stalking and pointing dog. It's a good choice as a deer dog, and you're getting the pick of the litter. So it's a pretty awesome situation. So from there, I would keep in mind the stuff that's in the blueprint regarding choosing a nice quiet pup, and from there choose the pup that you like. If you really like the look of one pup for a certain reason, but the breeder's trying to say, I think you should choose that one because of this or that, but your heart is on a different one, choose the one you like. It's your dog, you're gonna be the one training it, and if you feel good about the pup you choose, then you're gonna feel good about it in training, and that thing of feeling good about the pup and getting the pup that you want, that tends to run right through everything you do with it. if you don't feel good about it, then that can run right through everything that you do with that pup or dog. So that's a big one. Choose the one you like. And as for the kids playing with the pups a lot, that's okay. The main thing is the pups being separated and having quiet time outside as well. That's probably one of the biggest things is that I would recommend that to talk to breeders about, or that I would hope that the breeder of a pup that I was getting, just that, you know, if the pups are always inside and always spending lots of time with, that's great that they're spending time with people and kids and stuff and having that socialization and getting used to different people and confidence and all of that. It is really good. And not having any of that isn't a good thing. But I think this can be part of the reason why getting, you know, heading dogs can sometimes be better if they're coming off a farm and that, because it's particularly with like early on kennel training and stuff, is because they're often being raised in an outside environment in kennels. And sometimes some of the other breeds, you know, I know for sure that some people that breed, or any breed of dog for that matter, could be any breed of dog. But I know of breeders that have their whole pup pen set up inside in the lounge, and the pups are raised from day one inside, and they're sort of free running around the house and on people's laps and on the couch, and kids playing with them the whole time. And then if you're going to be, as far as like getting the dog, a puppy quiet and training, your separation training and kennel training and crate training, too much of that inside environment and all through the house and all over people and just with people constantly can make that side of it much harder. Whereas if the puppies, as they grew up, spent more time in a quiet outside environment with their mum and with their litter mates, as they grew up as young puppies, then separation and kenneling and crating is easier later on. I think that's one big thing that some breeders can make harder, is that the pups don't get that quiet time in a quiet space, being separated from people right from young little pups. And they don't, I'm not talking about the breeder like separating each pup on its own and like crate training a pup before you pick it up. I'm talking about just like with the mum and its litter, just at least having a bit of a puppy crate pen set up out in the garage or in a kennel or somewhere quiet. So the pups are introduced to that and they're not just brought up in a lounge next to the TV with people fussing over them the whole time. Yeah, that would be one thing. If you're saying, is there anything that I can talk to the breeder that the breeder should or shouldn't do? That's probably the main thing. And that's it. That's the end of the Q&A. Thanks to everyone that has signed up to the Deer Dog Training Blueprint. If you want to find out more about it, you can go to biggameindicatingdogs.com and check out Big Game Indicating Dogs on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can check out my stuff on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, all under Paul John Michaels. We'll see you in the next one.